The vice president chooses her vice president. The Supreme Court isn't as extreme as some people say, and a judge rules Google's running a monopoly, which is obvious since if you want to find out who that judge is, you have to Google it. That and more on this week's America Uncovered headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Let's start off with some good news. The FDA approved a new blood test for colon cancer screening for adults 45 and older. And in a test sample of 8,000 participants, the blood test was 83% accurate at detecting colon cancer. This is the first screening option approved by the FDA that's non-invasive. If this method becomes widespread, then younger generations won't ever have to experience the indignity of receiving a colonoscopy. But the social media generation may prefer getting one. After all, how else can you take a selfie and a picture of your food at the same time? Speaking of cancers, Marxism. Last week, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was declared the victor by the election authority that he controls in the presidential election. Even though he looks like a used car salesman that rolls miles back, and even though, according to tallies released by Venezuela's opposition party, Edmundo Gonzalez likely beat Maduro by millions of votes. Wow. No way, you're kidding me. An authoritarian did something authoritarian? But look at how happy the people are that Maduro won. They're trying to tear down a billboard of his face out of pure joy. Rigging an election is one thing, but being so blatant about it that you leave ample evidence proving you actually lost by millions of votes, that's just sloppy dictating, man. The EU says it doesn't recognize Venezuela's election result, and neither does the US. But you know who did accept these results? China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin, who both congratulated Maduro on his, and I want you to know I'm using the vocal equivalent of air quotes when I say this next part, election victory. Not surprising that authoritarians would stick together. After all, there's strength in solidarity, and they're going to need that strength because they're really pushing the Overton window. And anyone who doesn't like it, Putin is pushing through the Overton window. Speaking of elections, Kamala Harris has officially secured the Democratic presidential nomination. And because this is America and not Venezuela, she didn't win the nomination by blatantly rigging an election. Instead, she was just given the nomination and skipped having to go through an election at all. Yay, democracy, USA! So now that it's officially Trump v. Harris, Trump has deployed his newest, perhaps most brilliant line of attack: misspelling her name. In a Truth Social post, Trump blamed Harris and Biden for the state of the country and referred to Kamala Harris as Kamabla. Now, this was obviously a simple typo, is what I'd say if he didn't misspell her name in the exact same way 10 minutes later. Clearly, this is the act of a brilliant tactician at the height of his Machiavellian machinations, because when I looked up Kamabla, Google redirected me to the Wikipedia page for the Kambala, which is a buffalo race held in the Indian state of Karnataka. Kamala is half Indian, as Trump aggressively pointed out, and buffaloes look kind of like bulls, and Wall Street has a statue of a charging bull, and Trump is blaming Harris for Wall Street's problems, calling it the Kamala crash. It all connects. All these squares make a circle. Just follow your nose. It's brilliant in its simplicity, and by making you go down the rabbit hole, you're focusing more on him and less on her. Or the senior citizen misspelled something by accident. But I think my theory of Trump playing 7D interdimensional subconscious chess makes way more sense. It's all covfefe. But Harris was able to get the focus back on her when she announced her vice presidential running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, causing the nation to let out an enthusiastic and exuberant "K?" The real reaction for just about everyone not living in Minnesota was, "Tim who?" Walz is a progressive former high school teacher and veteran and has proved he knows how to go viral, as he's the one who first called Trump weird, leading to many other Democrats calling Republicans weird. I said it was viral, I didn't say it was good. After all, Weird Al Yankovic is weird, and I'd vote for him in a heartbeat. Especially when he's performing his song parody, fat and dressed like America Uncovered's officially endorsed presidential candidate, Chris Christie. Many on the left are excited about this pick, as Walz has been able to push progressive policies through in his state. Here he is signing a bill that guarantees free breakfast and lunch for school children. And many on the right aren't excited about this pick because Walz was governor during the Minnesota riots that occurred after George Floyd's death in 2020. Yep, those are definitely some mostly peaceful smoldering ashes. So, like any politician, he's done some good and some not so good. And it's all a matter of what you can stomach. It's like that old saying, if you can't handle me at my city burning to the ground, you don't deserve me at my free school meals. But if you think Republicans are weird, what's truly odd is how Walz getting the spot was a bit of a surprise. I'll tell you why after the break. Welcome back. Days before Walz was selected as Harris's running mate, Philadelphia Mayor Cheryl Parker was accused of accidentally leaking that Harris had chosen Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro as her running mate in a tweet. In the tweet, Parker says she's proud to support Harris for president and Shapiro for VP. And she included a video that said it.
We're getting behind Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris for president. And Josh Shapiro.
Josh Shapiro.
Josh Shapiro for vice president.
Of course, that didn't happen, as Josh Shapiro was not chosen as Harris's running mate. Journalist Ernest Owens says this tweet was scheduled to be published on Monday, but was accidentally sent out early. Harris held a rally in Philadelphia on Tuesday, so it's believable that the Philadelphia mayor knew something the rest of us didn't know. However, according to an inside source at the mayor's office, this isn't an announcement of anything. This is just the mayor showing her support for Shapiro. So it's not an accidental leak, just an endorsement. Yep, a professionally shot endorsement trying to sway one person only. It's all very, as Walz would put it, weird. After all, if this was a leak and Harris changed her mind last minute, then politics have officially become so theatrical that vice president picks are getting focus grouped and spoiled like Marvel castings. Why not go all the way with it and leak all the cabinet positions? Secretary of Housing and Urban Development? Robert Downey Jr. Secretary of Defense? Robert Downey Jr. Secretary of Treasury, Health, and everything else? Wait for it, Robert Downey Jr. Because if bringing him back to play Dr. Doom proves anything, it's that the only organization more desperate than Marvel to bring lapsed fans back in and reclaim their place on the top of the mountain is the Democratic Party. Meanwhile, a Virginia man has been charged with threatening to kill Kamala Harris. Besides threatening Harris, the man, identified as Frank Lucio Carrillo, also made threats against President Biden, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and several other officials in Arizona. He made these threats on Getter, a social media site used primarily by conservatives. There's a lot that's shocking about this story, perhaps nothing more than learning there's a social media site called Getter, as in Getter done? I'm all for sticking it to big tech and forging your own path, but could you have found a better mascot than Larry the Cable Guy for that? The Supreme Court chose to not step in and rule on a lawsuit brought forth by the state of Missouri that seeks to block the sentencing and gag order against Trump in his New York case, where he was found guilty of 34 felony counts, which proves two things. One, that the Supreme Court justices that were appointed by Trump aren't beholden to him, as many feared, especially after their limited presidential immunity ruling, which had some people scared that Trump could now get away with murder. But more importantly, by keeping the gag order in place, this shows that even the people who might like Trump also wish he'd shut up from time to time. Speaking of the Supreme Court, the Democratic chair of the Senate Finance Committee says Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas took even more trips that he failed to disclose that were paid for by billionaire and Republican mega-donor Harlan Crow. Many will say this proves Thomas is corrupt, while I think it just proves that anyone who says that doesn't have any real friends. What? You don't have billionaire pals that shower you with such extravagant gifts you lose track of just how many there are? I've talked before about how the U.S. military is facing a recruitment crisis. They're so desperate they even tried to recruit gamers. Well, they found a new method to try and get more people to sign up. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Last year, the Pentagon signed an $11 million sponsorship deal with Johnson and the United Football League, which he co-owns, to try and increase the number of enlistments. And was it a wise investment? I mean, surely the U.S.'s scant military budget wouldn't be used on something superfluous, right? Well, it turns out this deal was such a failure that the Pentagon is demanding Johnson return $5 million, claiming that not only did it not lead to one single new recruit, but they may have actually lost recruits since their time could have been better spent elsewhere. So they spent a fortune getting The Rock, expecting him to boost the popularity of their organization, and they wound up massively disappointed and somehow less popular? Wow, I had no idea the DC in Washington, D.C. stood for DC Comics, because this is Black Adam all over again. Except this movie actually gained more recruits since watching it didn't cause negative military enlistments. And finally, U.S. District Judge Amit Mehta ruled that Google is illegally maintaining a monopoly, using its power to hurt competition and stifle innovation. The U.S. Justice Department filed an antitrust lawsuit against Google last year, accusing them of spending billions to block their rivals. During the trial, Justice Department lawyers argued that Google used their dominance to charge inflated rates from their advertisers while feeling no rush to improve the quality of their products, which is ridiculous. Their products are always perfect. Take, for example, their AI Gemini, which depicted racially diverse Nazis. Yep, just like Hitler always said he wanted diversity. Judge Mehta scheduled a September 6th hearing to set the next phase of the trial to determine what penalties or forced changes will be levied against Google and their parent company Alphabet. But don't hold your breath on those being implemented anytime soon, as this decision is definitely going to be appealed. But for now, this is a moral victory for smaller companies, anti-monopoly advocates, and most importantly of all, Jeeves from Ask Jeeves. Some of us still haven't forgotten about you, buddy. While Mehta ruled against Google, he acknowledged Google got to where it is by having the best search engine. So if they're the best, what's the big deal about trying to stay on top? Well, it's not always the best idea to get all your information from one place, especially when that place shows a bias. According to All Sides, a media company that checks the bias of sources, Google has a heavy liberal bias, and it grew from 2022 to 2023. But what do I know? I'm just being paranoid. I mean, it's not like only getting news from approved sources can lead to misinformation. Which reminds me, congratulations again to Maduro for winning the Venezuelan presidential election in a totally legit, not at all suspicious manner. We here at America Uncovered like our news like we like our coffee. Unfiltered. I chew my coffee beans. If you want news that's nonpartisan, then here's another video I think you'll like. I'm sure YouTube won't hold it against us that I just spent several minutes talking about how its parent company is a monopolist, right? Right? America Uncovered wouldn't exist without your support. Click that orange button to support us on Patreon. All it takes is $1 an episode, and you can set a monthly limit. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.